estoy en ruta de hacer un vídeo explicativo de todo el tema de Virpil y tal. Ahora además que tengo pues un montón de juguetitos en casa, ¿verdad? Y bueno, pues la verdad que tengo ganas. Tengo ganas también de probar esto, de probar la extensión con la nueva base y todo eso. Mira, aquí está la base anterior, que realmente al final resultó ser el mismo tamaño que la base nueva. O sea, yo pensé que iba a ser más grande y es exactamente el mismo tamaño, ¿no? Y bueno, pues ahí estamos, a la espera de que acabe el SAS is Life y nos ponemos ahí a saco, a saco con el tema de Bear Pill. Viste que se puede crear material también para multitool en la máquina de Salvage. Yo algo había escuchado de que esos materiales se podrían utilizar para reparar. De hecho, por un momento la gente pensó que incluso la Vulture tendría la habilidad de reparar, lo cual no tenía sentido a priori de que pudiera hacerlo, la verdad. Pero aún así no descarto una nave que... Es que no sé. O sea, una nave que sea capaz de pillarse la chatarra y de usarla para reparación y tal. O sea, no descartaría... Claro, es que todo esto ha un giro de los acontecimientos muy grande. Sobre todo porque vemos también el tema de... ¿Cómo se llama? El tema de la Reclaimer, que hemos visto que ya está con la carga física, ¿no? Los paquetes que produce pues son carga física y se mueve. Y además están moviendo cajas grandes, no sé si os habéis fijado, que están moviendo cajas grandes, ¿no? Por cierto, hay una cosa que no me fijé, que voy a mirar rapidísimo.
So here we go.
Test.
This is the audio test.
Test,
This is a
test,
one,
test,
two,
test,
one.
test,
I was think
test,
I
baby,
wanted to
test,
get
baby.
some.
1,
I
2,
like
3, 4.
potatoes are great.
Buenas,
I
Alari.
love potatoes.
I'm more of a rice guy. You know?
Potatoes and rice, as long as it starches.
That's right.
All right, so I think the sound test works. You guys ready to start the show?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, there we go. We go to the title screen. That's the title screen. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live Persistent Entity Streaming. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, it's where we take about an hour out of the end of our week and we chat with our developers. Sometimes we take a look at what they're working on, have them demonstrate some live process for us. Other times, we hold their feet to the fire and make them answer the questions from you, the Star Citizen community. And this week, we are going to watch Benoit and Paul's macrame art for the next hour. It's the art show. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I've been practicing all month, guys. I'm ready for this.
So about a week and a half ago, we posted a thread up on Spectrum, and we collected. Good start. We collected a bunch of questions that the community had about one of the biggest kind of tentpole kind of name recognition features coming to Star Citizen in the upcoming Alpha 3.18, persistent entity streaming. And so we're going to talk about that today, what it is, what it isn't, what it does, what it doesn't, and so forth. And before we get into it, allow me to introduce the man who probably needs no introduction, but we're going to do it anyway. CEO and founder of Turbulent, our partners at Turbulent, Mr. Benoit Beauséjour.
Yeah, everybody. I'm the same guy. Yeah. CTO though. CEO would be great.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, CEO would be great.
I'm going to get a message from Mark right now. Oh, there it is.
Exactly.
There's the 3 dots from Mark.
Oh, there we go.
And then someone you might recognize from last year's CitizenCon presentation on persistence and server meshing, Mr. Paul Randell.
Hey guys.
How you doing, Paul?
Good.
We don't get to do many videos. The last time we were together was when we were filming that CitizenCon thing a year ago.
That's true.
It was almost.
And we were all alone in the office.
Me están presentando ahí a Benoit, Ben y a Paul, que son... bueno, están trabajando en el estudio de Turbulence en Canadá. A ver qué se cuentan del PES, pues bueno, sabéis que el PES un requisito imprescindible para que el server mesh sea una realidad y para que el universo tenga vida propia, ¿no?
Of course. Yeah. Well, you know.
All right. So,
Cool.
right off the bat, we vamped for 3 minutes. Let's start. Let's talk about persistent energy streaming. Before we get into the questions, let's just start. Let's set the table. What is persistent energy streaming? Now, I know we just did the ISC segment 2-3 weeks ago and whatnot, but everybody watches different things and whatever. Now we got Paul. We got Paul's answer to the question. So actually, we had Benoit answer it last time. So Paul, I'm going to point this one to you. What is persistent entity streaming?
Well, persistent entity streaming is basically taking the entire scene graph of the engine, which is the entire hierarchy of the universe, players, all objects, and take that, which was previously stored on, and at most game engines, it's stored in the memory of the server or on the client. We take all of that and we push it to a database, and that gives us the foundation to basically stream the entire entity hierarchy to client servers and to persist. So that means we can shut down.
Dice, ¿qué es el Persistent Entity Streaming? Dice, el Persistent Entity Streaming es, tradicionalmente, en los motores de juego, la información del estado de las cosas, de toda la jerarquía de objetos y demás, se almacena en la memoria del propio servidor. Lo que nosotros hacemos con el Persistent Entity Streaming es trasladar esa información a una base de datos, convertirla a base de datos de tal manera que nosotros podemos alimentar tanto el servidor como el cliente y además tener persistencia de esos sucesos, ¿no?
Giant skyscraper. It's like lifting the skyscraper up 150 feet off the ground, digging out the old foundation, pouring in a brand new foundation, and then dropping the building back on top of it, and trying desperately not to spill and knock everything over that's inside the building while you do it.
And making sure the doors still
100%.
work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good analogy, because if you look at it, the entity system and the scene graph, that's the foundation of the engine, right? So everything uses it. It touches everything. Every single game team, everything a game feature is touched by this change. So it is a very good picture you're drawing there. So.
And to address some expectations that the community may have had, we see the different streaming talk shows and the threads on Spectrum and stuff like this. While persistent entity streaming will be, again, the thing that so many future systems and new systems will be built on, for 3.18, the focus of this is mostly in maintaining what came before, converting what came before, and ensuring it works with this new foundation.
Yes, pretty much.
Okay.
Like right now, I know one of the questions, if you want to jump a little bit into those, is when we talk about PS, we talk about the server and we talk about the player shard. I think that was one question, and people asking, okay, what's the difference between a server and a shard? And for now, for this very first version, there's not a difference between both, because we still run one server per shard. We separate those two words because eventually a shard will be much larger than just one server once we get to server meshing.
Claro, esto es importante. O sea, lo que nos está diciendo es que el PES de momento lo que va a venir es a sustituir lo que tenemos actualmente. Y de hecho, una de las preguntas que comenta que se ve en los hilos de Spectrum es cuál es la diferencia entre un shard y un servidor. Sabéis que la persistencia va a estar dividida por fragmentos al principio, hasta que consigan hacer un fragmento lo suficientemente grande para que varios servidores se alimenten de ese fragmento hasta llegar al punto de la región europea, ¿no? Que esto es lo que nos han comentado y tal. Entonces dice que por el momento el tamaño del fragmento, del shard, o sea, coincide con cada servidor, ¿no? Cada servidor es un shard al uso ahora mismo. Por el momento, ¿no? Digamos que primero lo que van a tratar de hacer es que el PES funcione con lo mismo que hay ahora, ¿no? Tratar de que primero funcione, así como están ahora las cosas, y luego ir evolucionando esa tecnología.
That is over time on a given server, because items will persist now, right? Typically right now when a server restarts, the state of the world is sort of lost, other than your ships and your character, which actually live outside of that in the current version. when a server restarts, everything else is gone. NPCs reset to their initial spawn positions, doors reset, the entire thing starts back up to the designed initial state of the game world. So that's true after a server crash. It's true on a brand new server that we're adding, and so this sort of auto cleanup, servers also restart over time. Like, some of them sometimes don't have players left on them, and then we restart them to recycle their memory, things like this. Currently, the state of these servers are lost, right? So what that means is the effect in 3.18 will be that over time, you'll start seeing things that persist across restarts, right? And then so an old server will have a lot of modifications, right? Because all of that stuff doesn't get necessarily cleaned up by a restart.
Yeah, I would add though with persistent streaming and our new shard database, but also the global database, there's the added benefit that every items you take from your shard and put in your inventories, they persist in the exact state you take them out of the shard. So previously your persistent database was just an external database. It was very limited, just a list of items basically. With persistent streaming, when you have a ship and you load stuff into that ship, and you put that ship into your inventory because you landed on a landing zone and it gets stowed into your landing zone inventory. If you play on the next day and you take that ship out of that inventory, it actually comes in the full persistent state as we stowed it from the shard. So there will be things which you will notice which obviously weren't possible without persistent entity streaming. But again,
claro, está comentando un poco el tema de que anteriormente un servidor se reseteaba por temas de memoria o demás cada cierto tiempo, y entonces esto reiniciaba lo que es el proceso de que todos los NPCs volvían a empezar de cero, todo el estado del servidor volvía a empezar de cero con su diseño, partiendo del diseño inicial planteado de lo que era el empezar el juego, ¿no? Entonces, ahora mismo con el Persistent Entity Streaming veremos como dice, antiguo servidor, ¿no? Que esté ligado pues a esa shard y demás, veremos que con el tiempo pues se irán viendo cosas que antes no se veían. Se irán viendo pues que la vida en ese servidor, los sucesos que ocurren en ese servidor van persistiendo. En la mayoría, o sea, en muchos de los casos, ¿no? Se dice que habrá casos, supongo que está hablando de casos límites, de que habrá cosas que no. Otra de las cosas que está hablando también es del estado de las naves, que anteriormente, con el sistema que tenemos actualmente, hay cosas que no se pueden hacer, que simplemente hay un listado de objetos y que es limitado, ¿no? La capacidad de personalización, no de personalización, sino de objetos que podemos almacenar en nuestras naves, ¿no? Estaba comentando el tema de la personalización porque, aparte de lo que están diciendo aquí ahora mismo, el Persistent Entity Streaming permitirá precisamente que la nave, la información de la nave, se guarde en esta shard, en esta nueva base de datos llamada PES, y entonces recuperemos la nave cuando la llamemos o cuando carguemos el juego y estemos en la nave, pues recuperaremos el estado de las cosas en la nave, ¿no? Y algo que comentaron acerca de la nave es el tema de la personalización de objetos y tal, como cafeteras e historias de estas o decorados, que era algo que iban a plantear de manera diferente debido al Persistent Entity Streaming, de la posibilidad de quizás poder comprar un objeto en una tienda en el juego y poder poner una cafetera en la nave y que por el Persistent Entity Streaming pues este objeto efectivamente persista, ¿no? Y lo tengamos ahí, a diferencia de lo que es esa personalización que tenemos con la serie 300, ¿no?
Will start obviously right after persistent entity streaming hits. So for the very first version of persistent entity streaming, you will just use the same matchmaking logic you have right now. That means if you start up your client, you get randomly matched to a server or a shard. I can use those terms interchangeable at the moment because they are pretty much the same thing. Obviously, it's the same as right now. You can play with your friends, so you would join the same instance. If you crash out of a game, we reserve the slot of your current shard. So that means if you crash out, you will be able to have, I think it's 10 minutes to log back in and get connected to that shard so you can recover anything. And as I said earlier, all items which you take into your inventory, that's what you will keep with you, which you can bring to any shard. So that is your way to basically make sure the stuff you want to really like keep, you can keep by just putting it into your inventories.
Big differences between what's stowed and what's unstowed. Basically.
Yes.
So let's talk some. We have a few more questions that are in that vein. The stowing things versus unstowing. Does PES allow entities to persist across all servers, or does it only persist on the server that the item was originally spawned on? So this is almost certainly, you already answered the question. You store it, you take it with you. This is about if I dump a can, what happens to that can? Does it get replicated everywhere else? How does this work?
So if you depending on the type of item, and of course if there's legal ownership attached to it, right, you can stow it and keep it and bring it with you across shards, right? So that's the first thing. But for items even that you legally own, that you leave, let's say I have a gun that I legally own, and I drop it somewhere in Port Olisar, and then I stop playing, and then I come back later and I get match made into another shard. That gun is still in the other shard. It persists per shard. So everything that's in the game world, so unstowed items persist in each server.
Vale, está diciendo algo bastante importante, comentan, ¿no? Que el tema a la hora de nosotros pues tener un crash o demás, tendremos como 10 minutos para poder, en torno a 10 minutos para poder hacer matchmaking en ese servidor que se está recuperando y poder recuperar el estado de las cosas, ¿no? Dice que a la hora también de poder, a la hora de poder nosotros, digamos, poseer un objeto de forma legal, algunos objetos no se podrán transferir entre shards, ¿de acuerdo? Porque le están preguntando, ¿los objetos se conservarán entre shards o cómo va eso? Si yo suelto una pistola por Olisar en el suelo y la poseo legalmente, o sea, es mía, esa pistola cuando yo me reconecte a otro servidor, pues la tendré y dicen, no, lo que está comentando es que esa pistola seguirá en la shard, o sea, del servidor en el que yo estaba. O sea, si yo consigo entrar en ese otro servidor en el que estaba, sí podré, en el mismo servidor en el que estaba, sí podré encontrar esa pistola en el mismo sitio que ya la dejé. Pero al conectarse uno nuevo, no estará ahí, pero sí seguirá persistiendo en el otro servidor, ¿no? Aunque yo no esté en el server. Aparte de esto, está comentando de que cada vez, a medida que avanza la tecnología, pues cada vez ampliarán más el tamaño de las shards y cada vez serán más y más grandes, ¿no? De momento, el matchmaking en esta primera iteración nos meterá de forma aleatoria en el servidor que toque. En el futuro, cuando las shards sean más grandes, será otra historia.
How this will be 319, 320, 321, 4.0, whatever the numbers. Don't read into the numbers. I'm just saying numbers, people. How it will be in the future versus how it will be in this very first patch that includes it. So we are going to bounce back and forth between talk of the future and where it's going and talk of what this next first iteration is. So this is one of those things where we're going to have to rely on our wonderful community content creators out there to follow the discussion, follow the threads, and we're going to be bouncing back and forth. It's the only way to discuss this at this point.
Yeah.
So if will that coffee cup or gun still be there for others to find when the player placing it isn't online? So that thing that you don't own, when I log off, does it disappear with me, or does it persist there, and for how long? Stock cleanup.
Well, as we hinted earlier, if you take a coffee cup and you unstow it or you drop it on the floor in a shard, it stays on that shard, and it stays there as long as we will talk about the cleanup process a bit later, but it will stay there basically forever, and everyone can go there and pick it up. And if it doesn't matter if the player is logged in or out who dropped it, like the moment you bring something into shard, it's part of the shard and will stay there with the persistent shard forever.
Yeah, that was one confusion I saw throughout the questions was it's important to notice that it's not like you log into the game world and all of the items you've placed in the world are now suddenly overlaid in it. No, when you put something in one world, one shard, one server, it's in that server. and so whether you're online or not at that moment, right? So yeah, that's the there's no, if I log off, is my coffee cup I placed on Clio still there? Yes, doesn't matter if you're online or not for that specific for items placed in the game world.
I think the only expectation, the only exception to that is that when you log out, obviously your player gets stowed back into your player inventory, and if you do a ship bed logout, your ship gets stowed together with you into your ship into your player inventory.
And that includes items that are in the ship as well.
Yes, it's always yes. If we talk about stowing and unstowing, it's always the entire current state of that object, including everything which is, I talked about the scene graph.
Hay que mirar un poquito el tema del el proceso de limpieza, ¿no? Porque dice que tienen un clean processing, es decir, para evitar la sobrepoblación de objetos en el servidor, tienen que tener algún sistema, evidentemente. Pero dice que si ese sistema no hay la necesidad de activarlo, en resumidas así tal, por lo que he escuchado, si tú dejas un objeto, ese objeto persistirá en ese servidor para siempre. Es decir, si dejamos un objeto nuestro, un pico de peluche, lo que sea, lo plantamos en ese server y ese server está ligado a su propia shard por el momento, como están indicando, y entonces en ese servidor ese objeto estará ahí. Si nosotros nos vamos a otro servidor, evidentemente no estará ahí porque seguirá estando en el servidor anterior, ¿no? Y persistirá básicamente para siempre, dice.
Point you have to understand is every single item can only exist once, right? So you can't have a copy of the same exact instance of an item in multiple shards. If you have your ship and you bring it to shard A, it is in shard A. That ship can't exist in a different shard. And there's a good reason for it. If it would exist in multiple shards, what happens if in one shard someone shoots the left wing off, in the other shard someone shoots the right wing off, right? We can't allow that to happen. So what that means is if that ship is in a shard, it's locked to the shard. It is just part of that instance. If you take that ship and bring it into your global inventory, that's then your way to take this ship and bring it with you to a different.
Claro, hay varias cosas, es decir, está hablando que incluso si nosotros dejamos una nave desalmacenada, que le llaman unstow, ¿vale? Nosotros la dejaremos en ese server y ahí persistirá en ese server, ¿no? Y además también dice que los objetos solo pueden existir, o sea, no puede haber copias de los objetos en un servidor y en otro, o sea, solo los objetos son únicos en Star Citizen. Entonces, si nosotros, la manera de nosotros llevarnos la nave es hacerle stow, es decir, nosotros hacemos logout en la cama, y al hacer logout en la cama, sí haremos stow de la nave y de los objetos que contenga y nos la podremos llevar con nosotros a otra shard. Pero lo que está diciendo es que si nosotros nos desconectamos, nuestra nave se quedará en el sitio. Y se quedará ahí, pues, en plan, ahí se queda, ¿no? Lo que yo tengo dudas es de qué pasará, o sea, claro, le voy a preguntar porque...
Word, but you can see a shard again as its unique individual instance. There's no cross-shard replication planned. We do, once we talk about player bases and so on, we do have discussions with design right now how we can do that for, like, if a player builds a base on a planet, for example, we kind of want to show that on all shards, not just on the one shard the player's in, but those discussions are still happening.
Okay. I'm going to skip ahead on our list here because the next couple questions are all kind of hit the same point. But so let's talk about a very typical scenario that happens. We're a game that's still in development. You land on a ship on a planet, and the server crashes at 30K. Yes. If you load back into a new server, how does the player find their ship? Find their old ship at this point, since it wasn't stowed properly, it was landed out.
Yeah, I don't know, Benoit, if you want to take that.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the 30Ks never happen. No, no. So
Views and opinions expressed by Benoit Bossiger don't represent Cloud Imperium Games, Robert Space Industries, or its subsidiaries.
Right. So in the case of you have a let's start from the beginning. You go to the ASOP terminal and you unstow a ship. So the ship is first in your location inventory. It's in the global DB. You request the ship, shows up on the landing pad. That actually behind the scenes unstows the ship, so it moves from the global database to the shard. Now you can now it's being actively simulated by a game server, and so there's thousands of updates on it, right? To keep it up to date in the DB. You go in it, you start flying it out. You put cargo in it, you drop some items in it, whatever. Then 30K happens, right? Server ran out of memory, or something like this happens. Now, when you come back to the game, that ship is still in that shard. All right, it's still in the persistent database of shard 24, for example. And so, if you come back and you're match made, most likely going to be match made on another server because shard 24 is not available at the time, especially if you log in rapidly back in. When you enter your new shard, that ship will not be available for sure, right? So, but it will be available for insurance claims. What we are looking at this moment for this problem, because we know that's a problem, obviously, this is not cool, right? Is that when a server crashes, well, we have a dedicated recovery mechanism that we're actually putting in place right this moment. We're working actively on this right now throughout our current stability testing, which will auto stow back the ship into your location inventory. And so what that means is we don't want you to be stuck with your ship stuck in a shard that's no longer available, right? You were actively playing with that ship. It's got cargo in it. We want you to be able to grab it. And so in the case of a 30K, your ship would get auto stowed, same as your player, right? Because there's no difference between a ship and a player in this instance, right? So that's the goal that we have for 3.18, is to make sure that case doesn't happen, so that in the case of a 30K, your ship is just stowed back in the exact state it was in at the moment of the crash. And so you keep your stuff, right? We don't want you to be stuck with a ship that's unavailable, and then you need to find the shard again, and it's in, that's like a guessing game. So we don't want you to be stuck in that.
Exactly. I do want to add though that eventually, and that's a great feature of persistent entity streaming, if that server 30Ks with persistent entity stream, before persistent entity streaming, that means that this whole world would be dead because the memory is gone, everything is gone. With persistent entity streaming, however, the shard and the state of the shard still exists, right? The server crashed because it ran out of memory, or there was a game code bug or whatever. It's always game code bugs, by the way.
Yes, always.
It's never the core tech.
Yeah.
Anyways, when that happens, we can actually start up a new server, and it can load back that shard and then continue simulation for exactly where we left off. Again, for 3.18, because we don't want to address matchmaking just yet, we will do what Benoit just said, where we try to locate all the ships and we stow them into your location inventory so you don't lose your ship and the progress on that ship. However, the ultimate goal is that when a shard server crashes, that we restart a new server for that shard, and that matchmaking will allow your player to reconnect to that shard. And then
Vale, o sea, el tema de la reconexión que estábamos hablando antes, de que tendrías como un tiempo para conectar, que lo está aclarando ahora el compañero, es que dice que eso es el objetivo. Es el objetivo que hay a largo plazo de conseguir, ¿no? Pero que de momento, que lo que están tratando de resolver para la 3.18 es lo que pasa un poco ahora, ¿no? Que si hay un 30K en un servidor, que es importante, que podamos recuperar el estado de nuestra nave y que se almacene y que se considere como stow, ¿no? Como almacenada la nave, lo mismo que los objetos del jugador. Entonces que por lo menos que podamos recuperar a partir de ahí.
this, you will still stay connected, and we start a new server, or we have a fleet of servers already running which can take over that work, right? But that's obviously far in the future. So what we're saying is, in this very first version, to be on par with what we have right now, server crashes, we take player and we take the ships.
Incluso está diciendo de que en cuanto la red de servidores esté activa, el server mesh evolucione o lo demás, simplemente pues, o sea, cuando la tecnología avance, cuando el peso avance, pues simplemente con la red de servidores que tengan disponible, la idea es que si el servidor llega a crashear, que tú ni siquiera de que el jugador no perciba, como lo hace ahora, el tema del crasheo, y que simplemente se recupere la sesión que tiene mientras está jugando, y que ya otro servidor tome las riendas de lo que está sucediendo en el juego.
It's always just...
Pero estamos hablando de a futuro, o sea, no penséis que vaya a ser así ahora. Está muy bien ponerse palote, pero no es el momento todavía. Es un TM.
A roller coaster of emotions there. Hearing the problem and hearing the struggle, and then oh no, and then getting to what we're doing to solve it. And oh yay, it was like fail and save all over again. This is a good example of what the work for 3.18 is. 3.18 is not about with regards to persistent end stream. They're still salvaging and the PTV racetrack and the new rivers, and there's all those new things. But for PES is not about unlocking new developments for 3.18. That will be 19 and so forth and so on. This is about discovering all the things that break because of this foundational change, and then developing new tools and new methodologies like this auto stow for the player and the shit that you talked about.
Bueno, lo que nos está comentando Discolando es que la 3.18 va de que de que vamos a flipar en colorines, chavales, que la build se va a romper porque esto va de todo lo que rompe lo que es el PES, de todo lo que rompe este nuevo sistema, y tratar de ponerle soluciones. Así que iros preparando, que va a ser divertido el viaje.
Why?
Well, there's always the resource constraint, right? So the same team who would probably work on matchmaking is currently working on the entity graph. And it's also about risk. If we go and quite frank, 3.18 is a giant risk already, because so much new technology, right? We're replacing a database which we have built over the last 5 years, and it came to its limits in the last couple of patches, as we all, I think, experienced. But that is like 5 years of development, which we're now replacing with complete brand new tech. We have, I think it's at that point, probably 8 different kinds of new services which we're deploying. We also at the same time switched our underlying back-end communication tech to a new framework, which we already battle testing in live right now, but a lot of new services using that new tech. So there's a lot of moving parts coming together. So every piece we add on top of that adds more risk, right? So now we also need to change matchmaking. Now we need to change all those things add, and it obviously makes the release way less manageable, right? So what we do is we try to reduce the risk by obviously the core needs to come as one piece, because there's no way to just introduce the replication layer without the database. For example, we need the minimum set pushed together, but we can't, we try to reduce, okay, what can we not do right now? Let's do that in the next iteration. Otherwise, it will be just a burning pile of issues we have to walk through. And
Vale, está comentando el tema de que pues ahora mismo en los servidores de Live también se están probando un nuevo sistema de servidores de comunicación de voz, que hay el tema del matchmaking y tal, ¿por qué no se hace ahora y demás? Para que te enlace, o sea, ese tema del matchmaking nos habían dicho que te iba a enlazar, que iba a ligar a gente pirata con gente de Bounty Hunter, con afinidades, jugadores con afinidades, ¿no? Para hacer engage del juego y tal. Todo eso de momento nada, porque dicen que quieren minimizar, porque ya hay demasiado riesgo puesto en la 3.18 con todas las nuevas tecnologías que están poniendo, porque no podemos poner, o sea, tratamos de hacer lo básico, o sea, lo básico es que no podemos separar las capas de replicación del PES, o sea, que eso es o sea, tratamos de reducir al mínimo los posibles impactos, porque si metemos todo lo que tenemos que meter ahora, va a ser una pila de bugs en llamas. Entonces que que para las siguientes iteraciones irán haciendo y tratan de minimizar los riesgos. Está diciendo que es un parche arriesgados en el sentido de que probablemente vayamos a ver muchísimos fallos, ¿no?
To bring it faster into your hands, right? As you know, we rely so heavy on you guys to play our game and be our beta tester, which is amazing, by the way. But in order to benefit from that, we need to push things out as they come online and not just wait until it's fully perfect and fully polished and then give it to you. So we want to give you iterations as fast as we can, but that sometimes means that it's maybe a step back or it's not fully feature complete just yet. I mean, you guys all...
Claro, dice que en ocasiones, que lo que es el sistema del juego de poder aprovecharse de nosotros como beta testers, que no acabo de decir beta testers, aunque somos alfa testers, pero bueno, da igual. El caso es que dicen que tratan de mandarnos ciertas cosas lo más pronto posibles para poder probar y ver cómo es el rendimiento, que en lugar de cosas totalmente complejas y ya terminadas, ¿no? Que pues de eso va el desarrollo de Star Citizen al fin y al cabo, ¿no?
Who are regular readers of our monthly
Y pues ahí, a partir de ahí poder tomar decisiones y poder ver si está en el camino adecuado, todo ese tema, ¿no? Ya sabéis.
factor is necessary for salvage to work. If you watched the hull scraping and vulture segments in last week's episode, the bit where the cargo was physicalized in the back of the ship and you had to move the boxes, that was the cargo refactor. So remember as
Vale, está diciendo algo importante, Discolando, dice, la refactorización de la carga es algo necesario para la mecánica de Salvage, y si habéis visto el Inside Star Citizen de este jueves, habéis podido comprobar cómo dentro de la Reclaimer se movían las cajas, y eso es el cargo refactor, ahí tenéis la carga, chavales. Eso está de puta madre.
that comes out. So as of this moment, with the only constant in game development being change, but as of this moment, Cargo Refactor is still very much in 3.18. It's still very much expected in 3.18. It is necessary to have salvage and hull scraping and the vulture. So,
yes, and on top of that, I would...
Claro, dice que el cargo refactor es necesario para la vulture, para el hull scrapping, así que de momento el cargo refactor está muy en la 3.18, así que tranquilos y tal.
Work with that. It's not just cargo, but part of why the cargo team needs to do their refactor is also to support persistent entity streaming. Right. But other things like the insurance system, the VMA, the character customizer, whatever, the scanning,
transaction systems, money laundering.
We have even the transit system. All those things, they needed changes for persistent entity streaming. So there's a lot of like those teams. They like it would be awesome if they could always just work on new features, but especially with large foundational changes like this, they need to go back and just adjust what we already have, which is also, again, which is why there's not just cats and dogs and chainsaws. That's actually 20 other things in that mix already. So,
Double Slasher says Benoit is already laughing nervously. That's just how he laughs.
Yeah, that is true.
It's just a general I'm going to jump ahead in our list again to a question that's come up quite a bit in the chat. Make sure we get them all in since we're already in the back half of our show here. Let's say I'm engaged in furious one-on-one combat with another player. We're in our furball, and I'm about to lose, and I decide rather than to take my death, I choose to Alt F4 and just quit the client. What does PES do for this situation? How does PES handle this situation, if at all?
First of all, that's a bastard move, right? But not entirely related to PES. I understand the mental link, right, between like persistence and spawn points and alt F4ing and stuff. There already have been some changes in the game related to
Está hablando de qué pasa si tiramos del cable en combate.
Alt F4ing while in combat to save your FPS items. Already the ships stay in the game world in 3.17, and then you can, they basically get destroyed. On basically that move sort of allows you to save your weapons and armor, right, where you respawn outside. So PS is not going to solve that because that's driven by game rules. So even though we have persistence, that's a thing I wanted to stress out, even though entities persist, the game rules and the game code can still decide what to do. They can override any values, right? So like if you think about respawning or things like that, same thing for logging. So for combat logging more specifically, which is a problem, obviously, right? And it's something that we're gonna want to tackle at some point. But it's the real fix for that is not a new persistence system. If PES solved all the world problems, that would be awesome, but it's not the case. The real solution is a proper logout timer, where if you decide to Alt F4 or to kill your client or whatever, you stay in the game world for that lockout timer, which will allow your assailants to basically finish the job if they have to, right? And that makes the game fair. Most other games also do the same thing. So that's that's the idea that we have on the table now. But obviously, we're not tackling this specifically with PES, as even though there is persistence, it's not going to affect combat logging specifically.
It's a game design task, not a PES task.
Yes,
Pretty much.
yes.
Claro, está diciendo que el tema de resolver el tema de tirar el cable, que la gente se desconecte en medio de un combate, que entiendo la mentalidad de que la gente lo liga al PES, pero bueno, el PES en realidad lo que hará es que la nave se quede ahí, ¿no? Bueno, a no ser que desde lo que de la cama, ¿no? Y que es algo que está sobre la mesa ahora mismo, que están debatiendo, pero que es algo relacionado con las reglas de juego. Que efectivamente haya un tiempo de que si alguien hace Alt F4 o mata a su cliente, pues que haya un tiempo de deslogueo.
Right. And again, to our point, let's get back to feature parity. For 3.18, we will keep our current logout system. So when you log out and you log back in, you log back at your last landing zone location. However, PES does enable all of that cool stuff. So with PES, it would be very trivial for game code to change their systems to allow you to log exactly back where you left off, right? However, it always comes back to how much risk do we want to add for 3.18, and also the devil is always in the details. If we want to have game code now to completely change, okay, you log back in, where you log back out, then that doesn't mean, okay, we have the tech right now, so we can just enable this feature. That means a lot of design work. Like how does it work, for example, if I am suffocating and I log out? I think the design wants you, for example, then to run a timer, and eventually when you log back in, you would be dead because you were suffocating at that moment, so you want to spawn back in hospital and so on. So there's a lot of design consideration coming into play, and then also game code systems which need to handle that properly. For example, what if I log out on a planet, and then on the next day I log back in, and at that exact position is another ship landed at the moment, right? So right, game code would need to probably do some position resolving and all those kind of things. So in order to not tackle that right now, we will just keep the login logout flow how it is. However, as I said, with persistent entity streaming, game code teams now have all the tools at their hands to fully persist whatever they want at the state and restore.
Claro, están hablando que el sistema de loguear y desloguear por el momento funciona de la misma forma que conocemos ahora. También están hablando de que, sin embargo, los equipos ahora de desarrollo pues tienen las herramientas para poder hacer que si tú, por ejemplo, te estás sofocando, te estás muriendo y tal, te desconectes, podrían poner un timer para, o sea, en el caso de que te deslogues, podrían poner un timer, ¿no? Un contador para que cuando te desconectes te mueras, ¿no? Porque te estás sofocando, que es algo, son consideraciones que tienen que hacer para saber en qué situaciones ponen esos tiempos, en qué situaciones no, que hay varias consideraciones a tener en cuenta, refiriéndose a lo de no apurar las cosas y primero poner lo básico, ¿no? Que ese tipo de reglas que en el futuro, o sea, el equipo tiene las herramientas, por ejemplo, de que si nosotros estamos en un planeta, nos desloguemos en un planeta, al volver a entrar al juego, estemos ahí definitivamente, que habrá que hacer resoluciones de problemas de qué pasa si justo en la misma localización que tú espaneas, pues efectivamente hay una nave en ese lugar, que habrá que hacer cálculos de reposicionamiento, pero que definitivamente el equipo tiene que hacer, o sea, tiene las herramientas para poder hacer eso posible, pero de entrada no quieren adentrarse en pantanos, quieren tratar de minimizar los posibles riesgos del mal funcionamiento del cliente, o sea, del juego, ¿no?
I think there's also an interesting element of surprise, I think, that we're expecting already, just being in the main line for a little bit, where the entity system has this concept of serialized variable. I'm sure we've talked about this in the past, right? Which are basically variables that are replicated. When we say replicated, it's between the server and the client. Now, these things did not persist before, right? So everything that needed to be persisted needed to be handled as a persistent item, whatever. PES makes all of those serialized variables persistent. And so that means that any game component that was made using serialized variables suddenly has persistence. So I'm expecting some surprises, right? So things that, oh shit, now this persists. Wow, this is cool. For example, wear and tear on your armor or things like that, are now going to just stick, right? Because before they were lost every respawn, now these things can actually persist for real.
Exactly.
I want to follow up on some things before we move on.
Acaba de decir una cosa interesante, que es el desgaste, el uso de tu armadura. Ahora mismo persiste, a diferencia de que antes no lo hacía, pues ahora sí puede persistir. O sea, entiendo que en la 3.18 vamos a tener el desgaste, o todavía no. De las armaduras, eso puede ser espectacular.
Alt F4 and try to abuse the system without also punishing folks who have legitimate client crashes or internet outage and whatever.
Right.
That balance is one of the forever challenges of every online game, and Star Citizen is no more immune to it than anything else. So that's one of those considerations that will obviously be debated and talked about and discussed.
Claro, el tema del sistema del logueos y todo ese tema y las penalizaciones y tal, que tienen que tener, que es un debate que tienen interno, que todo videojuego tiene online, que es el tema de no penalizar a la gente que realmente crashee de verdad el cliente, ¿no?
I do want to add, on a personal note, folks will often... It's easy to assume that we do these shows just for the backers, that when we produce an ISC or an SCL, it's just for the people who support the game. But one of the weird kind of hidden truths that have emerged over the years is that it's also a great way to inform your work base. A lot of the people who work for CIG learn about what other teams are doing and how they're progressing and get...
Está diciendo algo interesante, ¿no? Que dice... Que los Star Citizen Live y los shows que hacen no solo sirven que están hechos para los backers, pero no solo sirven para informar a los backers, sino también sirve para informar al resto de equipos de CIG de que están haciendo otros equipos, ¿no? Y que incluso pues pillan ideas y demás, o están haciendo esto, tal.
And misunderstandings and stuff that we were seeing within the community also existed within our own teams.
Claro, dice que algunos malentendidos que se generan en la comunidad también existen a nivel interno de la compañía, porque son bastantes equipos trabajando, claro.
As Paul said, it's one of the reasons 318 will be about maintaining and converting what we had, and then like we're off to the races with what every other programmer and designer in this company, once they have this tool set with them, is inspired to create, and that's what's really exciting about PES. All right, we have got 15 minutes left. So I want to talk about some density management stuff, because a lot of the conversation is about, I'm going to throw a can, somebody's going to throw a can, somebody's going to throw a can, and pretty soon we're going to have giant mountains of trash like it's Idiocracy. What are the
Great
plans?
movie, by the way.
What are the plans for culling in PES? Will it involve staying when in proximity to players? What can you tell us about culling plans?
Okay, that's a good question. With our old system, we had this, it's called lifetime management, and it would arbitrarily remove entities once they hit a certain cap. And we realized that's not really great for play experience. For example, I think at the moment, players can only spawn up to 3 ships. If they spawn another ship, the old one gets removed. For persistent entity streaming, we actually revisit that problem, and we decided, okay, how can we make this nicer for the player, but also B, how can we make this actually work good for persistent entity streaming and also for server meshing, where maybe it doesn't make sense if a player has 5 ships spawned and they're all separated in open space and streamed out, they don't really cost us performance. So why do we still need to arbitrarily limit that? And for that, we have the guys in Frankfurt developed a new system. It's called density management. And it operates on relative cost of an area. So the idea is that instead of just taking arbitrary numbers on objects, we look at areas and we look at the amount of items in that area, and we only start to remove items the moment the relative cost of that area becomes too high. So as long as you spawn your ships in different locations and they're all spread out, we will never touch them or remove them. However, if like now everyone goes to the same spot and you start spawning ships and spawning ships at the same location, that's when the system will find out, okay, now the performance goes down because our relative cost in that specific area goes too high, and then we will start deleting items which also follows a certain rule set. So we will delete oldest items first. We will also have a relative priority on items, so a player ship, for example.
Vale, esto es interesante. Está diciendo de que en vez de tener un límite de 3 naves por jugador como hay ahora, lo que han desarrollado compañeros suyos es un medidor de densidad de objetos en la zona, de tal manera de que si se ve demasiado saturado el rendimiento en la zona, empezarán a borrar algo que se aplica tanto para naves como para objetos, empezarán a desaparecer los objetos antiguos o las naves antiguas primero, ¿no? Que si, por ejemplo, nosotros nos vamos a sacar naves en diferentes lugares del universo, mientras no quebrantemos esa norma de la densidad de objetos, de demasiada densidad de objetos, o en una zona pues alguien venga y empiece a spawnear cantidad de cosas, pues al final la nuestra, si es la más antigua, pues acabará siendo eliminada de la zona. Pero que en un principio, a no ser que se incumpla esa norma, pues no se borrará nada.
Doing that, right? That's what you guys will do anyways. So I hope I didn't give you any ideas.
No, that idea was already out.
No shortage
Yeah,
of ideas.
I figured as much. So basically the system will take care of this, but it will be a smarter system. It's a smarter system than what we have right now.
Yeah, one thing to add to density management too is that it also has this concept of references. And so, for example, if an entity, because this also covers NPC entities, right? So like AIs and whatever else. And so, if a specific entity is actually being referenced by a mission, active mission or active player, for example, then there's a reference counting system that will prevent those from being actively reaped, so that it again I think the goal with density management is really to make sure stuff doesn't pop out of your view and break your game experience. So but we still need a density management system to prevent overloads, but that's the approach in general.
Claro, está comentando con el caso que el tema del medidor de densidad, o sea, el administrador de densidad también se utiliza para la IA, para la inteligencia artificial, pero en el caso de que sea una nave de misión o un NPC de misión, una IA de misión que tendrá como una excepción en la regla a la hora de ser eliminado por antigüedad, ¿no? Pero que tienen todavía que trabajar en esto y que quieren prevenir, pues efectivamente, que se rompa la experiencia de tu juego y te desaparezca una nave en la cara.
Current lifetime system, you have to put in a lifetime policy on every single item, entity, class, and then if you forgot that, for example, on an item box, that means those item boxes never get cleaned up, or if you set a wrong value on it. So it's very like at this when we initially designed that, we thought it's a good idea to give like per entity class a policy. However, with so many different entity classes, it becomes a maintenance and also a balance nightmare. And for that, we basically went away and said, okay, well, let's programmatically calculate the cost of items, and it doesn't really matter like if someone changes the the asset for an item, it will automatically update the cost of the item because we look at the mesh and the size, the bounding box, and figure out the cost that way. And then the only thing design needs to do is give it a little bit of different priority. And at the same time, as Benoit said, also like mission relevant objects, we just like give them a ref counter while the mission is active, so the density system wouldn't delete mission relevant objects which would render your mission, for example, uncompletable. So we want to avoid basically the density system deleting whatever your mission box you're supposed to pick up, right? But that system, like again, it's not intentional what we have right now in the game. It's just a result of our old lifetime system and just the sheer amount of maintenance and balancing design needs to do to get the system right. And that's also part why we replaced it with the new density management. And it also, the old system never took location into account, right? It doesn't matter if 50 items are on the same location or if 50 items spread out. If the system thinks, oh, 51, it's one item too much, I delete the random one. And obviously that's not really what we want. And it also predates even server streaming. With server-side streaming, we can now have items in the world. As long as they're not streamed in, they don't cost anything, right? They are just in memory, and now they're in a database, so it's even cheaper to hold them. So
they're saying,
well, yeah, because if density was too aggressive, it would basically undo whatever PS is trying to achieve. So
right.
it needs to be perfectly balanced, right?
That's actually exactly where I was going.
That said, though, I still expect the first iterations of our first Evocati test that we need to tweak the system heavily, because we haven't like really seen how it behaves with, we can do all our testing in-house. It's never the same as if we open it to you guys and you just do whatever you guys do in the game. So until that happens, we obviously there will be heavily tweaking. So maybe the first version will be very.
Están hablando de, o sea, ahora mismo están hablando del tema de la densidad del administrador de densidad de objetos y del tema de la persistencia que tiene que estar del PES, que tiene que estar balanceado, porque si no, si está mal ajustado, pues destruiría el PES, ¿no? El sistema de administración de densidad. Y que cuando salga a manos de Bocati podrán hacer más ajustes, porque hasta que salga a un público más grande, al público, pues no van a poder tener todos los datos que necesitan, ¿no? Y que el comportamiento es diferente.
MFDs, gimbal modes, scanning angles, all these things to persist within player ships.
So I did actually inquire about this a little bit before we came here, because obviously this is game code driven, so it's not something that the PES team actually controls, though we do enable persistence for those things. So I do believe that gimbals modes might persist because they're implemented with a serialized variable. So that means that this would stay. For MFDs and scanning angles, we don't know yet. That needs to be confirmed by the combat team. But if it's implemented with serialized variable, then yes. If it's not, and it's a reset, like again, a bit like the spawning location, right? If every time you sit in the seat, it changes a value, then it doesn't matter if it's persisting, right? So, but that's something that all the game teams will be tweaking up until we get there. And if they can benefit from it, I'm sure they will jump on it. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is. I really like this question because it demonstrates the uncertainty that's involved in what's going to happen.
El tema del PES y del tema de las pantallas multifunción. Las pantallas multifunción persistirán con el PES o los ángulos de escaneo, por ejemplo. Y dice que de momento que piensa que los modos de disparo, el gimbal, assist y fijo, que sí que persistirán. El tema de las MFD está por confirmar, pero desde luego que si están pendientes de los equipos de combate, dedicados al combate, pero que si esto sucede, o sea, si tienen la oportunidad de hacerlo, desde luego van a aprovechar esa tecnología, ¿no? Que está por confirmar todavía, pero eso sería una gran noticia, la verdad, si tuviéramos eso ya.
Together, when we go to Evocati through PTU, and then it's a question of just converting those things that aren't to, so that they will work. Last question before we go. I asked you this at the end of our last PES report, Benoit. I'm going to do it again because now that Paul's here. How do you feel? We've done a lot of tech talk. We've done a lot of process stuff, but you guys have been on this for over a year. I mean, I don't know exactly how long you've been on it, but with the light at the end of this tunnel, not exactly close, but closer now than it's ever been. How are you guys feeling?
Like
You go for it. You go for it, Paul. I did this last week. No.
me personally, I'm super excited. Like as you said, we worked on this like almost 2 years on the new database, on the new tech, and we worked obviously with our strike team pretty hard, but in isolation in our own stream to develop all the tech, develop new services, all the stuff. And now that we finally in game dev, it's really exciting to see it all come together, to start seeing game code teams jump on it and adjust their system. So it's really great. And for me, I also personally feel it's a very big stepping stone towards server meshing, because this is the tech which actually enables us to separate the simulation from the state, and that will allow us to introduce server nodes, and that will allow us to replicate state between different servers, and that will also allow us to really scale the system, right? So I'm super excited. At the same time, it's also a giant challenge. As I said, it's a ton of new services, ton of new technology. It all needs to be battle tested. We're working hard on that. But yeah, I'm excited.
Dice que ¿cómo te sientes acerca del server mesh, ¿no? Digo el server mesh, el PES. Y dice, pues llevamos 3 años trabajando en esto y ahora, bueno, pues que en resumen está dando sus frutos y esto nos permitirá el poder empezar, o sea, se hará posible la realidad del server mesh porque nos separa lo que es la simulación del estado de las cosas y esto permitirá, pues, efectivamente, la existencia de los nodos, de los servidores como nodos que se conecten a lo que es la simulación y que está muy entusiasmado por todo esto.
Game and different subsystems and stuff. So it's super exciting, and it was great to go through questions from the community and try to, get especially the plans for 3.18, which I know are not simple to understand because of where we're going, and this is like the stepping stone to get there. But it was really interesting to see how you guys see it. Also, some questions were interesting in sort of predicting what could happen, which is also great. We're in the same boat, right? Like even though we do try stuff and we know what will work and what will not, there's so many subsystems there that there's a lot of room for surprises. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm totally pumped.
I feel like other projects might be afraid to admit how much they don't know, but that's not CIG. That's not us. We're going to discover a lot of this together as it continues to go. All right, we've still got a minute. I'm going to ask one more question then. You've got this audience here that'll go up on YouTube. You've got the audience there. What one thing do you want to make sure everybody understands about this work, about PES, about 3.18, about your role in it, whatever you want? If you could make sure, drive home one last thing that you want to make sure everybody takes away from this, what would it be?
Like for me, it would really be the appreciation and the understanding that while on the surface, especially with 3.18, it might not feel too different of what we have in the previous build, the foundational changes underneath and the structural changes in our core engine, in our core entity system, all like everything you do runs to complete new set of service, complete new set of like the replication layer got completely rewritten. The entity system got completely changed. We separated entity creation and entity spawning. There's a lot of like really cool stuff and like really exciting tech behind powering that. And it's also all made to scale and to like run in the cloud, have stateless services, be able to horizontal scale this thing, and like all this stuff, even though in this very first version, it won't feel so much different. Like the code that runs behind the scenes, the little bits and bytes are completely different. And just to get to parity with what we had before is a giant achievement, even though it doesn't feel so different in the very first version.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail perfectly. I think that's the That's the big change, right? Is that we're finally making with this, I think, the game a true cloud service, as it should be, a cloud native service, which is really what we need to make a real persistent universe. And so this is a giant step in that direction, right? In moving the game server and its services together into a true cloud native setup that can really scale to the vision that Chris has for this game, which, even for persistence itself, persisting.
Están comentando, dices, cuando si tuvierais una última cosa que decirle a la gente para que se llevara a casa, ¿qué le diríais? Y dice, bueno, que a pesar de que la 3.18 no se aprecien los cambios a simple vista, todo el trabajo que hay por detrás para lo que es el tema de la persistencia y del logro que supone a nivel tecnológico que se ha conseguido, que es brutal, ¿no? Que es impresionante que la gente pues aprecie también ese todo código refabricado, ese todo código rehecho, o sea, hecho nuevo para poder escalarlo y poder conseguir el deseado server mesh y la visión de Chris Roberts de Star Citizen.
Yeah.
Remember, ISCs just came out, updates on hull stripping and the Drake Vulture, and a little bit about FPS repair in there, tucked in there. So check that out. Next week on ISC, we've got Meet the Team for a brand new team that has not existed at CIG before. They were founded just 5 months ago, and this will be the very first time you're hearing from this team and getting introduced to the team. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You're going to have to tune in to find out. And then yeah, we'll be back here for Star Citizen Live next week. I didn't look at who it was before I did this. I'm not perfect. I really should do that stuff. And then the big thing, though, remember, CitizenCon is coming back on October 8th. It is your chance to see the latest and greatest from many of our teams around the globe as we begin this journey to 4.0 storytelling promotion that we're doing. You're going to see that stuff in CitizenCon, and then continue beyond that. So check that out. That'll be on Twitch. I think we're starting at 8 a.m. Pacific, but check out citizencon.com for the details because I clearly cannot remember them. So for Star Citizen Live, I'm Jared Huckabee. That's Benoit Beauséjour, and I always say his name because it took me so long to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so proud of myself.
You have it. You have it.
And
you
that's
have it.
Paul Rendell. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Benoit Beauséjour.
That sounds perfect. You have it.
I know.
Excellent.
It only took me like 6 years.
That's okay.
You have to work on your Rheindell though.
Yeah.
Rheindell.
You got a.
I'll work on it.
Bueno, y al final estaba comentando el tema de Benoit Beauséjour, que es el nombre que le ha conseguido años, le ha llevado años el pronunciarlo, por lo visto. Nos estaba comentando el tema de la CitizenCon, bueno, pues que nos van a contar cantidad de cosas y tal, mientras esperamos para lo que es el tema de la 4.0 y demás. La verdad, bueno, también nos comentaba que nos van a enseñar un equipo nuevo en el Inside Star Citizen de la semana que viene y que no nos va a decir qué es, que hace 5 meses que lo montaron y que no se acuerda de quién iba a estar en el Star Citizen Live. Que dicen, no soy perfecto, es lo que hay. Y chavales, la verdad es que tiene muy buena pinta el PES. Tiene realmente buena pinta. Y sobre todo, yo tengo más, o sea, espero que se note agilidad, ¿no? O sea, es decir, el estado de las cosas y todo eso que se ha parecido, pero el almacenamiento de objetos y demás, o la velocidad a la que funciona la base de datos, que sea diferente, ¿no? Que no se trabe tanto. Con el tema de los MCD, comentaron un poquito el tema este de que, bueno, de que tendrán que, en caso de que no se pueda mantener la persistencia ahora, porque no les dé tiempo a hacerlo, pues convertirán esos sistemas para que en un futuro sí se pueda. Madre mía. Dios. Buena Faibo, buena Fisher, buena Riker, buena Gato, buena Fisherman. Buenas, Tito Jim, Mauro, David Cintil, Senor, Bárbaro Ibérico, vamos a ver, Orneri, Cartafen también, Firasher, Carlinos, Nix también está por ahí, Locus también está por ahí, eh, y Malísima también está por ahí. Y bueno, si se me queda alguien, pues me decís cosas sucias por ahí y ya está. Eh, chavales, la verdad, mm, esto es que, a ver, tengo esto en la mano, tío. Tengo esto en la mano, tío. Ayer me preguntó, creo que fue Maese, cómo era la precisión en el centro, si costaba mucho moverlo en el centro, ¿no? ¿Veis mi dedo? ¿Vale? Pues mirad lo que se puede hacer en un Virpil para apuntar, chicos. ¿Vale? Con esto se apunta, ¿lo veis? Así se apunta en un Virpil. En ese espacio que estoy girando, y fijaros cómo se mueve. Es una locura. Es una locura. Pero diríais, guau, pero es así de blando y tal. No, porque aquí ya me cuesta, ¿vale? O sea, justo en el medio, por eso tienen las Cosmosim, ¿vale? Las Cosmosim Cono Center permiten esto, ¿vale? Luego ya, aquí tienes que... Aquí es más fuerza, ¿no? Aquí, a partir de aquí y para acá, es más fuerza. Muchas gracias, Comandante Galaxia, por esa raid. Entonces, este es el rollo de por qué hay que cambiar los camps, ¿no? Porque tenemos esto aquí en el medio, ¿vale? Tenemos esto aquí en el medio. En mi caso, yo he preferido ponerle... o sea, dejarle los muelles estándar porque me gusta que esté durito en las esquinas, ¿vale? Para que te retenga. El tema va que... no vendió nada. Aquí está este. Y por aquí está la palanca de gases. O sea, hombre, ah, no. Ahora me viene alguien a pegar con la lava y le hago así. ¡Fua! Y luego pillo el joystick y. Ay. Cartafen, te sigo desde hace bastante tiempo, pero es que te veo feliz y como lo estoy siguiendo, nos alegramos mucho. A ver, pero es que son varias cosas, ¿vale? Primero, el tema de los Birpil y tal, realmente es posible porque el canal va bien también. O sea, es que son varias cosas, Hartafen. En realidad es eso. O sea, ¿vale? O sea, y la verdad que es esto gracias al apoyo que es al canal, que es una pasada. O sea, yo estoy súper contento. O sea, es brutal. Eh, vamos a ver. Debería de... A ver, vamos a ver. Debería mirar qué está pasando aquí con mi vida. Aquí está. Vale. Bueno, pues empieza... Ahí está. Empieza... Ya activa el audio del guilde. Vamos a ver por aquí. Pim pam. Toma, dale. Zasca, zasca. A ver. Vale, pues ahora empieza todo el tema de la aventura. La aventura de ponerse a configurar los burpees, chavales. Ahora sí. Ahora sí. Madre mía. Uf. Lo que sí voy a dejar el destacado ya puesto para la gente que no haya podido ver el Star Citizen Live ahora. La verdad que es prometedora la tecnología del PS. Uf. Es que chavales, o sea, es que se vienen buenos tiempos para el Star, eh. Porque lo vamos a pasar mal, seguro. Pero, pero se vienen buenos tiempos, eh. O sea, y a ver qué tal va el Gen 12, porque es que la 318 no es solo el PES, es el jodido Gen 12. Claro, es el jodido Gen 12 también. O sea, a ver. Ayer borré todas las teclas y hoy tengo que poner... todo. O sea, hoy tengo que ponerlo todo. Vamos a ver, el tema de... el destacado, que lo subimos aquí rápido, pim pam, toma dale, taca taca.